Welcome to Truthiverse, a podcast for awakening minds who want to go deep. If you're vibing with the show, please do hit the like and subscribe buttons, and if you could take a few seconds to leave me a review on Apple or Spotify, it's actually super helpful for ranking the show up and getting my work out to more people. And remember, when you do, take a screenshot and send it to me on Instagram for a free thank you gift. For other ways you can support me, check out the show notes. I've listed ways you can do that there. Stay cool. Well, hey, it has been a minute. I have been very busy lately, just moved from one town to another in Mexico, so we're living in a completely different place, going through that whole thing. Still trying to finish the manuscript for book 2 as well, in case you're wondering when that's happening. Fortunately, I have a great friend and colleague of mine who is working his way through the manuscript, doing a kind of peer review process for me. One of the few people who can really help me with this type of thing, and so that's on the way, and it's going to be a 2025 thing. It's not going to be a 2024 thing, but finally I know when it's going to happen. And for those of you who've been waiting 10 years or 12 years to know exactly when book 2 is going to be available, that's when. So before I bring the brilliant Marizelle Arce onto the show, that's what I wanted to mention quickly. Also, as usual, with most episodes, part 2 will be found for the members of Truthiversity inside the Truthiversity. So to find that, head to truthiversity.com. There may or may not be a link in the show notes for a free 24-hour trial. But have a look. All the other stuff that I'm doing, that I've been up to lately, again, links in show notes so you can follow up on that. And yes, in the meantime, welcome back. Welcome back into my little sphere if we haven't been in touch for a while. And it's nice to get back on the podcast horse with a quality human who I thoroughly enjoyed chatting to in Marizelle Arce. So without further ado, here's Mari and myself. Enjoy the show, and I'll catch you soon. Hopefully inside the Truthiversity or inside my Evolve Yourself program, which I meant to mention earlier. I will have 1 or 2 more intakes before the year finishes. So to watch the masterclass and get the full explanation of what that kind of woo but very potent evolutionary modality is and looks like, how it works, head to evolveyourself.live and watch the free masterclass. All right, here's Mari and me. Enjoy. All right, ladies and gents, welcome to this episode of the show. This week, I have the pleasure of being joined by Marizelle Arce. Am I pronouncing Arce right?
Arce, yeah, perfect.
Arce. I was close. Marizelle Arce. So it helps to ask these things before you start the interview, but you know, we'll press on. So Mari has a massive amount of experience in the realm of health and wellness. Basically, a quick blurb about her before I let her speak more for herself. She's a naturopathic doctor who's been working for over 20 years in the field. She's never operated according to, you know, the germ theory paradigm. She's never treated people along those lines. And she's one of the few old school naturopaths still going, and she incorporates environmental medicine, which I would love to hear a little more about along those lines. So Mari, obviously, that's a quick sketch. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you operate, and what is the environmental medicine aspect of what you do?
Sure. So I dove into this this realm by first wanting to become a regular doctor because I didn't know anything better than that. But being very multicultural, my upbringing was very multicultural. I wanted to incorporate the traditionality of culturalism, right? So I actually dove into anthropology. So I started off with anthropology, studying a lot of different living and dead cultures in college. And then I was propelled to go into becoming a doctor, was completely disenchanted with that. Found naturopathic medicine, went into a naturopathic medical school, incorporated what I learned in anthropology, amongst other things, and realized naturopathic school, unfortunately, was kind of different, a different field, but the same game kind of thing when it came to regular medicine. And that's not how I wanted to practice. So I just took what I needed, and I started my practice with the understanding that germs don't harm you, and that what you eat, what you do, what you think, where you are, what you wear, you know, all those things have an impact negatively or positively in your health, in your life, in your relationships. So that's, I mean, it's a full-bodied approach, a whole aspect approach of understanding how health is, these little things that fill in that puzzle of who you are and how you are. So yeah, so I like to incorporate, and I loved to learn about peoples and their habits and history of diseases. And I was able to have the opportunity to study the works of many different scientists that discovered things in blood, and like, Antoine Béchamp and his microzymas. And then once I went down that rabbit hole, it was a whole other rabbit holes of blood work and looking at blood, and just, so many different people doing so many positive things, being written out of history. So I've, every day I just a little bit kind of dabble in kind of making sure that I am still have my foot down, planted, rooted in what, real medicine, real healthcare was, which was, what indigenous people learned, which is nature and everything about nature incorporated within our lives.
Yeah, right. That leads me to sort of ask you about you mentioned, because I've been speaking with, for those obviously people are not aware, since I mispronounced your surname at the start, they probably think I've just discovered you and we've just met, but we've actually been, we've actually been speaking now for over a year. And it's taken us over a year to organize to actually get in the same space and time together.
That's right.
So, but you mentioned the anthropological stuff and the traditional cultures and the lack of. You also mentioned the lack of disease in antiquity, and all of this kind of sparked, the Weston Price sort of stuff. He went around the world looking at these traditional cultures and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, could you maybe make a comment around the lack of antiquity of disease, which I think is important historical context for people?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a huge black spot for me when it comes to history, because when we look at Weston A. Price's works, which if anybody wants to, you go to nutritional, I mean, his simplified works, without going into a lot of studies he submitted, was Nutritional and Physical Degeneration. And that shows you about all the different cultures he visited and discovered how they didn't have to have a doctor, a dentist, and all this stuff. They didn't even have, some cultures didn't even have police officers, because they were all in tune and aligned with eating appropriately. They developed appropriately. Their mindset was appropriate. They were close knit. They were a nice society. Everybody knew their place. And you didn't see these diseases that we see even from the beginning of the early 20th century of tuberculosis, colds, flus, anything simple like that, to all the way, cancers and things like that. But then when you start to go, we're looking at Hippocrates' time, or Galen, or Paracelsus, or any person of antiquity, we start to see facets of disease. And so for me, it's kind of going, how were we diseased in antiquity, when there was no industrialism, there's really no pollutants at the time, there was really no chemicals per se. And I mean, you had wars and famines and things like that, but we weren't exposed to massive doses of chemicals in the air and or water. And then, Middle Ages, medieval time, it was, people were really sick. And then all of a sudden you have like indigenous populations not being sick at all. So for me, I start to see kind of, certain writings, certain works as, I wouldn't say fraudulent, but definitely not on the up and up when it comes to actually what has transpired in history. A lot of what I see is work what people say is real antiquity, like thousands and thousands of years old. Sometimes I look at it again because my anthropological, skepticals, skepticals, they're definitely skeptical. My glasses are on, and I am looking at it with the eye of a person who has discovered something in the ground. And the use of some radiocarbon dating, or what's called paleography, looking at the writing based off of how a person writes and what age and group they are. A lot of the works that we think are thousands and thousands of years old actually were only created back in the Middle Ages, when there were so much diseases due to wars and famines, and people living in really condensed conditions. So, I really believe Weston A. Price shows really truly that if you get back to nature, no diseases would actually occur because you are aligned and attuned. Your body is kind of, you know, resonating in the same way, and you don't have the stressors you would have living in a box in a city with electricity and all sorts of things kind of compounding your stress. So I mean, I've seen people kind of move away and step away and live in the country, and you see half of the stuff that they've had disappear. So, it's things like that that kind of put a stamp of approval of, when they say, oh, smallpox existed during Alexander the Great's time. And I'm like, if you really look at the work and decipher the actual things of what they're saying, they're talking about, maybe pustules from, and it was induced by, some sort of chemical that was applied by some sort of, alchemist,
Hmm.
at the time. And so, we have to kind of, again, take what we see in these books of antiquity with a grain of salt, and know that if you actually witness a person just simply moving into the country, like 2 hours away from the city, you see allergies disappear. You see, these exuberant ways that the body tries to kind of release toxins reduce because you don't have all these ongoings happening.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's kind of like extreme cases like places like Wuhan and Lombardy in Italy have like notoriously woeful air quality. So of course we expect respiratory problems in these types of situations.
Absolutely. Huh?
And just coincidentally happen to be the first hotspots. Um, so is this anthropological background that you have, was that a key part of why you never kind of got hoodwinked by germ theory? Is this partly also why you never, I mean, was there ever a point where you believed in viruses? Because I know your mum has she had a career in microscopy, and so that maybe played a part as well, right?
Yes. So yeah, I think that there's a multitude of little things that kind of like stirred the pot for me. I have a mom that was an electron microscopist, and she worked for very well-known institutions. And for her, it was already the starting point of being in her mid-20s, working in these institutions and questioning the narrative back then. We're talking about the early 70s, right? So having a mom that already is in the science field questioning, and being brought up as a child to question, and not to take things at face value because a teacher said so. I think that kind of spurred, like, that laid the soil, right? And then the little seeds of, you know, understanding how cultures don't know bacteria. They can't see them. So they don't respond to them as if that's
Mm.
what's happening. And they understood that there's a consequence to action. See, all cultures know this. So, you don't eat a certain food at a certain time, where like certain cultures have certain traditions for reasons. Reasons are responses to nature. These traditions, these rituals, these ceremonies are important because either they're created because they know that a group of people at a certain point need something to uplift them, or they need something to kind of have a reason or purpose, along with nature being cyclical in certain areas of the world. And there needs to be a correlation of how that is important to the people. So, watching how they respond to that and are linked with that, you don't see many of these cultures having colds or allergies or things like that. So again, that kind of added, as you said, it kind of fueled the questioning of, wait, is it really this that's causing that? And then, I mean, my own history, health history. I was the kid that always, like, I had an antibiotic here and there, um, and that wasn't the best thing. Again, my parents were, even though my mother questioned, my mother always felt like, oh, maybe the doctor kind of knows a little bit better, but also questioned, wait, she just had a sinus infection a month ago. Why is she on an antibiotic? Like, why are we taking an antibiotic again for a sinus? Why don't we find out what's causing the sinus infection? So by my early teens, I was prepubescent, and I remember this distinctly. my mom literally was like, okay, we need to kind of figure out our health here. This was the early 90s. And I remember my mom going, okay, let's just get rid of because she was reading articles and I was reading some things here and there. And it was like, let's get rid of the junk in the house. Let's start with that. Let's start with that. Let's start with maybe not drinking this pasteurized milk that has like sweeteners in it and chips and stuff. Let's start kind of doing more real food. And a lot of my issues started to go away. My own period problems and skin issues and sinus infections never came back. So my mom is a very scientific method oriented type of person. So for her, it was like, we see an observation, we see happenings. Let's do these different variables, see what happens. And what's the conclusion? What's the results? What's the discussion after all of that? And she saw a correlation with what you're consuming to what's happening. And that's when it really kind of, it was like a stamp, like, there's more to disease and health than just you take a drug for the problem. And the virus thing, forget it. I mean, she was questioning that when she was looking through the electron microscope. And so, it was always been a question mark. And the fact that some people get sick on a bus and some people don't when someone coughs, and this like randomness, it's very hard to kind of, as a science person who's like empirical and, this randomness didn't just fit. It didn't fit. It just didn't fit.
Right. And what kind of, I mean, what did you learn? Do you remember specific things that she would tell you about, her work in electron microscopy in connection with the existence of viruses or the lack thereof?
Sure. I remember she remembers like this one time when because she worked in an institution that was across from the hospital. And what they would do is they would get samples from the hospital, and to look to see, to help with the diagnosis of what the person had. And many times what she would be looking at, she would go, oh, these are artifacts. And that's the terminology one uses when one sees something that's kind of like, oh, this is not really pertinent, right? Essentially, almost everything she confesses, everything she was looking at was an artifact.
Wow.
Because when she used to tell me about all the different things you needed to do to the sample, adding all these different alchemical concoctions and then suspending it in literally plastic, and then getting it heated at 150 degrees, bombarded with electricity, I mean voltage, in a vacuum. She's like, I mean, at the point, nothing's alive, nothing's really reality with what you're seeing, and you're only seeing a two-dimensional construct of it. So you can come up with whatever story you want to come up with. But she remembers a distinct time when she was like, I was looking at it and I was like, these are all artifacts. The person has nothing. Like, that's what she's saying. And then the person behind her was like, no, I think that's a virus right there. And she's like, no, that's an artifact that looks exactly like this and that. And if you saw, and I can reference another, and he was like, no, that's a virus. That's this, that, and the other. And she's like, that's not a virus. That's just an expulsion of whatever material that's in here. It could even be the heavy metal remnant. And when they insisted that is what they saw was what it was, that's when she kind of knew that this was like almost like a gimmick. Like it was just a gimmick.
Yeah. So, well, we've got to make sense of this somehow. So yeah, it's a virus.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Okay. So you had a really interesting advantage there from a really young age in terms of, a mum who not only was not fully on board with it, but who was in the field and had like expertise with the primary modalities used by scientists and virologists to ascertain the reality of or existence of these things supposedly. And so you had that seed planted early on of doubt, which is awesome. It's a great advantage to have. So
it is and it isn't, because at the same time it's lonely. Because right. Imagine you're a 15-year-old going through high school and everybody's like, oh, I have the flu, I have this, and you're like, no, you don't. You just ate crap. I just watched you eat crap.
Yeah.
Like it's lonely because you go, but you didn't catch anything, and they're insistent, and the school's insistent, and their parents insistent, and everybody's insistent, and you're standing going, I'm the only one that doesn't like you keep your mouth shut and you just kind of go, okay, I'm just going to go through high school and keep my head down.
Yeah. I guess ignorance can be bliss in certain contexts. So you never really got into the Rockefeller sort of paradigm anyway. You were never really there, and you never really got into the contagion thing. You never formed a belief or any firm belief in viruses. So you kind of like the path was kind of laid early on for you to kind of become the like an old school sort of naturopath type healer, but the field of naturopathy is very interesting because it's obviously been hijacked at some point by big pharma and contaminated. Like naturopaths now, if you meet someone who's in their like late 20s, their knowledge base is quite different to someone who's a naturopath in their 60s, say. And they don't know anything. They don't learn anything about like pleomorphism or the terrain really.
Right, correct. And there's a difference between you'll if you ever interview a classic naturopathic doctor, one that's like fresh out the school, maybe 5 years, they'll distinctly tell you there's a difference between a naturopathic doctor and a naturopath.
Uh-huh.
Because naturopaths don't go to formal medical school, and naturopathic doctors too. So they want to call themselves doctors, and naturopaths are ones that, back in the day, and I don't know if they still have them, there used to be some online schools, but then before that were actually places you can go, but it was like 2 years worth of work or whatever, and then you kind of had an apprenticeship. So they like to make sure you know the distinction between the two. But most people don't realize that naturopathic doctors came from naturopathy and naturopaths, because Benedict Lust, in this country, in the United States, Benedict Lust was the first naturopath. He took the name that was coined by a couple, and he copyrighted it, and he called it naturopathy. Naturopathy, there was other things. There was other things that were naturopathy. It just wasn't called naturopathy. So
Right.
at the end of the day, the base of medicine of what we have is naturopathy. It just wasn't called that, right? So you have like the hygienists, and you have the physiologists, and you have the the mechanotherapists, what call it whatever, but that's what it was before, when you cared about what you were eating and what you were doing, and making sure that you were taking the right thing to help you feel better and cleanse the body of whatever it was. Um, but yeah, naturopathic doctors are a far cry from even their antiquity, which only started around 1930s.
Mm.
And even, I mean, traditional naturopaths too, as well. They're a far step from, what naturopathy started in the late 1800s. So
Mm.
yeah, everybody's if you are a naturopath or a naturopathic doctor, and you can quote me, anybody who wants to quote me on it, if you are a naturopathic doctor or a naturopath, and you believe that germs cause disease, you are so far away from what started.
Hmm.
Because the Lust and many others did not agree with the fact that germs cause disease. They knew what created the disruption and the imbalance, which was some chemical in or toxin from your water, your air, not getting enough sunlight, and not getting the proper nutrition, and obviously not getting flow, so movement, exercise, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, right. I think also now, like the way that society or industrialized, technologized society or civilization works is so like we live so far from our roots, like our ancestral roots. And when we're talking about these previous eras, the level of psychological and spiritual stress and distress would have been so much less than what we are dealing with now. Like the level of pressure to just survive and exist, and the
Mhm.
stuff that people have to do in order to do that, and the way they have to sacrifice their soul's calling. That is a level of stress that is quite new, I think. And we have so many things coming at us, pressurizing our time, pulling us in different directions, that there's a whole other level now of like psychological distress causing physiological imbalances and things that we then have to figure out how to manage, right?
Absolutely. I think we're in a place of like where your own path is divert it's kind of splitting up, only because when I look at my great grandparents, it was their life was very simple. But there wasn't this wanting to create as much, unless you were in a field or you were in a profession that was creative, right? Like, so if you were a shoemaker or a milliner or something, or even a baker, like there was creation, there was this creative process. But I didn't see that wanting to. I feel like now we're at a place where we need work to do, to live, to pay, to do things. But then we all of us want to create. We want to be artists of some sort. And I feel like we're now in a place where it's like you're trying to combine the two. And it makes it more complex because at the end of the day, like I want to just write, as an example, I just want to write poetry, but poetry is not going to get me anywhere. And I feel like my urges of wanting to create, to paint, and draw with my daughters, and I don't think my great grandparents had that urge as much. I feel like we're blossoming into these full-bodied souls that are appreciating the full complexity of our existence now, where they were like, just doing and creating beings. Of course, the ultimate creative process, right? Is to create another organism. But I feel like they didn't really embrace like the arts and the music and and I think now we're just starting to kind of like open that up where everybody wants to do that, and I think that's so beautiful, but it makes it more complex.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So we have these internal like pressures to like this creative impulse that needs an outlet. And I know, for myself as a musician, like it's incredibly frustrating when that impulse gets squelched by a million other things that have to be prioritized, right? It's like, God damn it. It's very frustrating. So yeah, like I think that's a great way. The way you put that is fantastic. And I'm going to try not to go off on a tangent there because it opens up a few other interesting sort
Oh,
of things
go, yeah,
about
whatever floats your boat.
the development of the like evolution of consciousness itself. Where like you said, we're very different to previous generations.
Absolutely.
And it's like we're becoming more rounded. Like the potentiality, the creative potentiality of a soul or the spirit is now able to express more fully than it probably ever has.
Yeah.
And through a particular medium of like we have analytical consciousness and introspective consciousness, and if you go back, in time far enough, that's not really there.
Right.
Even our grandparents didn't want to draw with the kids, kind of thing. Like you said.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a conversation my husband was having. He was like, I can't see my grandparents like sitting on the floor and coloring with their grandchildren. Like I didn't see it. Like I don't remember my grandparents sitting on the floor and coloring with me and playing. They played, but they didn't play, and you could see it, but you could see it in the many genres of music. I mean, growing up in the 80s, I remember I could literally probably count the amount of genres we had in music. And then you blink and then it's like 2005 and it's like, how did we get all these genres of music? Like there's so many more genres of music. And then art, we have so many different and distinct art forms and, incorporating mixed media, where it was like back in the day, it was just oil. You either carved marble or you painted on oil on canvas, or you sketched with charcoal. Now it's like, people are making art with cake and fondant and, like just, it's so beautiful to see that. And now we don't have time. We don't have time, but everybody wants to just like, I'm the worst person. I will, to the detriment of my husband, to the chagrin of my husband, I'll be like, "Oh, I want to do that," and they'll be like, "Really? Another hobby?" And it's like, "Oh, but I'm sure I'll be really good at it." He goes, "I'm sure you'll be excellent at it, but where are we going to put all the equipment for that hobby now? And when are you going to do that hobby?"
Yep. Yep. I'm curious. What do you know? What your human design is? Just as a tangent.
I do. I'm a manifesting generator.
Oh, that was my guess. Nice. Yeah. So apparently that's normal for you guys, and my daughter is also a Manny Gen. So yeah, it's interesting. I'd have like one or two things that I just really, really would love to just be able to immerse myself in. But it's funny now we have a situation where because of social media, all of us get exposed to a billion different things that we could do, right? And and that is very difficult to filter out. Like I'm like, oh, I could do that. Never tried
Yeah,
that. Never tried that at the gym before. Oh, that's an interesting way to use the bar. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
You
yep.
know, you're trying to
Mhm.
become this like weird kind of new like electronic renaissance human who, you know, has even less time in the day than we've ever had, but wants to do even more than we ever have.
Absolutely. And
Um,
then it's like you're so overwhelmed. And then you go, okay, now I'm overwhelmed and now I'm going to have anxiety because now I have no time to do the things I need to do.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let me get back to these some of the stuff I wanted to ask you about. Um, When you were, well, when I messaged you a year ago, yeah, you mentioned stuff like talking about home health, like how to make the home environment less burdensome for us on a health level, like you know the clothes we wear, the stuff we cook with, animals and plants in the home. Apparently, this is stuff you get asked about on a regular basis, so I know you're not going to object to me asking you again.
Yes. So, we actually live, I mean, environmental medicine is a very underused asset. And unfortunately, the treatments for environmental medicine is always um, the person rather than assessing the environment and removing that which is harming the people. So, like for instance, when a person has allergies, instead of like, okay, let's talk about maybe you're not getting fresh air moving in your house. No, let's get allergy shots or take a allergy pill. So environmental medicine is a very underrepresented and underused tool. And one needs to really assess the amount. I mean, if you step back and you really go, oh my gosh, the paint on my wall, my flooring, the off-gassing of my refrigerator and my this and my that, all the different carpentry, even just placemats on a table, all of that can be impacting you because they're manufactured in facilities that use chemicals. So unless you're getting like hand woven, cotton wool, linen, jute carpets, you're going to get some sort of off gassing, and it just needs to be I'm not saying for like when people go, oh my god, the sky is falling kind of reality. That's not where you take it. You understand that now it's your job. The things that you can choose to do is to support your body to just constantly be regulating to eliminate that stuff. But if you can choose a better flooring rather than getting vinyl flooring, for instance, you choose like hardwood, like bamboo, untreated bamboo, things like that. If you can get a cotton carpet or, hardwood furniture, you're way better off than you are getting all this, prefabricated with glues and all sorts of things like the MDF board and particle board furniture and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, I remember distinctly in high school we had a like a what do they call it like kind of like a woodwork kind of class that we would go to
Mhm.
until I opted out of that. But MDF was the wood that we were all cutting in class. Like
Mhm.
all inhaling that
Mhm.
shit.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so there was something I wanted to mention because we're talking about terrain here, and obviously we talk about.
Okay.
Oh, you're right. You're right. So yeah, talking about terrain. The bodily terrain, I think, is becoming more like recognized. Say, it's important how we treat ourselves. The immediate environment that you or I are sitting in is an extension of that terrain and influence on that terrain. And I think the awareness is growing around that as well. But it's interesting to look at the kind of I don't know the social discourse around these ideas, right? Like there's people who think that terrain is a theory. There's the terrain, you'll have different languaging like the terrain model or terrain paradigm, which I would prefer one of those last two as opposed to the terrain theory because I mean, I think when you go far enough into it, you realize it's not a theory, it's not an idea, it's not a conjecture, it's observable cause and effect reality, right?
Yes. If you go to a person who lives in Siberia, doesn't have a TV, and you ask them, Does sunlight make things grow? Yes. Do you need water? Yes. Do you need to eat food? Yes. Do you need to breathe, especially clean air? Yes. So those things are fact. Thereby, it's not a theory that they need to breathe. It's not a theory that they need to eat. It's not a theory that they need to defecate and urinate. And it's not a theory that they once in a while need some sunlight for themselves, or they need to drink water or breathe. So the terrain model is the understanding that, you need certain essentials in order to be the healthiest organism. And the paradigm, whether you use paradigm model is just the model. Paradigm is the way of doing it. So you go about getting the clean air and the clean water and the clean food. But when someone says theory, when they say terrain theory, it makes me laugh all the time, because I'm going, there's no theory behind, if you take away one of those things, I will die.
Right.
Thereby, it's not a theory that I need it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, if you have a house plant, has anybody ever had a house plant? Like, what happens if you don't water it?
All right, it's not a theory that it needs water. You know
Right.
that it needs water. It's a
Yeah.
fact.
And it's not going to die. If you don't give it water, it's not going to die because it's been infected with a virus.
Exactly.
It's like the absurdity of that thinking. Um, So there was a follow on from that, I think. But feel free if you have any other thoughts coming up around that. I like the languaging. I think it's good for us to get clearer on languaging for people, because I know a lot of people don't have that much time on their hands anyway to really do the deep dive stuff on this, let alone become like an expert at the level of someone like yourself.
Right.
So it's good if we can help people be clearer in their thinking and their languaging, like understand like germ theory is. I mean, it's to even call it theory is stretching it a bit. Like it's more of just a hypothesis or a conjecture or a bunch of
Right.
assumptions.
Right. Exactly. It's a theoretical model for a person. Like, so when people use the word theory, if you use the word theory in a scientific platform, a theory is, something that you've tested and you're coming up and they've come to a conclusion that thing that you've tested has come to the conclusion of doing what you think it's doing. And theory in a more English or grammatical or conversational way is like, I have a theory that it's theoretic. It's over there. Theoretically, I put the glove underneath, or technically or theory. So when they say germ theory, they're saying, like you said, they're saying it in a more scientific model, and that is a failure because germs have never been proven to cause disease. Thereby, yes, it's a total hypothesis in terms of, germs being the facilitators of what's problematic in people, what's causing, all these different sicknesses and catching of colds.
Well, and what do you see about when people say, okay, well, fine, I'll give you viruses, probably don't exist, but what about bacteria? We keep finding bacteria in the place of infection or this symptom, that symptom, and what do you say to that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, the bacteria exist. So that's, bacteria, fungus, yeast, they all exist, but they're all saprophytic, meaning that they all consume things that are decomposing, degenerating, dying. And so if you find bacteria in a place, that means that you're in a place where there's something that's decomposing, something that's dying, something that has been degenerating in either a short period or a long period of time, depending upon what bacteria, yeast, or fungus you find. So, when someone is showing, oh, but look, the water's contaminated because it has bacteria. No, look a little deeper. Go a little down that rabbit hole. I'm pretty sure there's something that shouldn't be in the water, and the bacteria are showing up to kind of break up what's there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we could see that bioremediation in many aspects all over the world. They even scientists use bioremediation, like getting bacteria to eat up the oil spills and things like that. So, we have to stop we stop bifurcating, good and bad. There's no good or bad. They do what they do.
Yeah.
We can't give them these like good or bad aspect. That's a very human thing to do. And so they're doing what they need to do. And if you think they're contaminating the water, they're not. They're just cleaning up the way they usually do.
Yeah. So does that apply to stuff like, we hear words like, oh, there's a problem with Giardia in the water supply or cryptosporidium or whatever. I mean, there's a concern around some of those things. Is Giardia a parasite? I can't remember now.
It's kind of what? I didn't catch that.
Is Giardia a parasite? I don't actually remember at this point.
Oh, Giardia? So Giardia is a bacterium. And so, I mean, if you're finding it in your water supply, there's something decomposing at the source or in the main part, or there's some sort of heavy metals or something, but there's something that shouldn't be in the water. Yeah.
Right, yeah. I mentioned that because that's, when there's like a public health scare around water, they're usually throwing out stuff like Giardia or cryptosporidium. Those are the two that I can think of.
But we also have to, not to try to cut you off,
no,
but
go,
also,
please.
yeah, so you have to also appreciate sometimes, because it depends on how they test the water, right? So if we test the water and we just put it on a slide and stick it into a microscope, okay, I'll give you that you found Giardia in the water. But if you are taking a sample of the water and putting it on a petri dish, and a specific petri dish that's going to grow the Giardia, then you're eliciting a response for the Giardia to actually grow because you're giving it the food to grow. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the Giardia is in the water, because you're just making it happen. You're forcing it to happen. And then the other aspect of it is, if you take a sample of it, you put on a slide, and then you're like, oh, the only way we could see Giardia is if we put this purple stain on the slide. Then again, you're eliciting Giardia to exist, because you're putting a toxin in the sample to create an environment for the Giardia to show up. So the only way I agree that Giardia is in the water is if you just took a sample, put it on the side, and stick it in the microscope and don't do anything to it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. As far as, okay, I'm going to look at my list here again. There are a number of things that I wanted to make sure we got to touch on while I do have Mari here with me available. All right. Well, with bacteria, can I get you to comment on the bacterial place in the pleomorphic cycle for people?
So they're in the early stages. So what you have inside of you, we'll stick with Becham's term of microzyma. So microzymas have different various stages, and they're all these stages of maintenance and regulation. When the terrain starts to kind of take a detour in a not so good way, the first stages are the bacteria. So when we see bacteria, that's like the early stages of something's off balance. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's off balance for a short period of time. It could be off balance for a long period of time. It's just not getting to a like full terrible. It's like a little terrible. So bacteria are at the beginning, kind of at the beginning of the cycle after the maintenance arena.
Yeah, thanks for that. So all part of the general life cycle of the microzymas. And not an invading army trying to kill you.
No. Yeah. Pitchforks. Yep, absolutely.
Right. So maybe can you flesh out, because this is something I don't think I've really done a lot of, and I've touched on it maybe 2 or 3 times in the life of this podcast, but to flesh out the rest of the cycle a little bit for people. So from the bacterial stage, in pleomorphism, if you do not remediate the environment, if you don't start cleaning up your terrain and improving things, how then does it play out?
So there's a 2-part answer to that. I mean, we can again separate to 2 answers. It depends on the area with which the terrain is off, right? So sometimes in certain areas, bacteria is the end of the cycle. Let's say it won't go any farther,
right?
Because it would be a destruction of that tissue completely, and then the tissue just dies. In other parts of the body, the cycle continues. So the cycle can continue to a mycobacterium, it can continue to a fungus, and then it can continue to a yeast. Sometimes in certain areas of the body, it stops at a fungus. Sometimes it switches over. In certain areas of the body, you can actually have a splitting of 2 different fungus cycles. You can do more of what's called a penicillian cycle. So you get like a penicillin or a candida type of response, or you can have more of like a tuberculinic response. So again, it depends on, it's not like, I want to say it's like a perfect circle in my mind. It is a perfect circle. Like you go from bacteria, mycobacteria, fungus, yeast, but it's not exactly like that everywhere in the body.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in a simplistic way, yeah, bacteria, mycobacteria, fungus, yeast, but not every place is like that. So like, for instance, in certain parts of the body, if you get a bacterial infection, it's like, oh, something's going on in that tissue. And if you don't address that degeneration in that tissue, the tissue just starts to degrade, and then you'll have like a serious problem. There'll be a hole, there. It won't become a candida or a tuberculosis or a fungus in any way, because that's it. That's the end stage for that tissue.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's actually a great little overview. And so, like, let me circle back here because I did start you off on the home environment thing, and and then we took it somewhere else. But apparently people ask you often about clothes that we wear, pots and pans we cook with. I mean, what's your approach to this kind of stuff? What do you like? What do you want people to try to avoid?
Aluminum. Aluminum pots and pans, anything with Teflon coating, I don't even like that fake ceramic coating crap. Porcelain, like really high heated porcelain coating cast iron, glassware. So any like that old kind of crock potty looking stuff, or I think it was like Corningware. They was kind of like a blown glass type of stuff. And then in terms of clothing, all the natural stuff, cotton. I mean, you have to be leery sometimes. If it's like highly manufactured cotton, you're going to get pesticides and chemicals on it anyway. So you have to be very careful what companies you support with the cotton you buy. So all the naturals. I mean, you got the linen, you got the cotton, it's got to say bamboo, not viscose. It's got to say bamboo.
Gotcha.
Wool. Linen, I think I've said that. Polyester is obviously out. Acrylics out. All the sportswear.
Yeah.
Absolute garbage.
Yeah. I love how they get us with their stupid gimmicks like, oh, it'll wick the sweat away. It's a quick dry thing. Like, oh yeah, because it's so bad to sweat when you're exerting yourself physically in a sporting context. Like, who cares? I don't understand the obsession with this stuff. But they get us with the marketing, right?
Of course.
So yeah, the forever chemicals, right? That's a problem with some of the pots and pans, the non-stick stuff.
Yes. There's you're looking at a lot of work that you'd have to do if you're doing a lot of like the Teflon coating is just pure. I think it's like pure evil. The fact that you literally can't cook in your pan or your pot if you have any type of canary genus bird. Like if you have like a cockatiel, I think it's a cockatiel, a canary, a lovebird, I think a parrot even, parakeet. If they're like even just like 3 rooms down and you're cooking with a Teflon pan, there's a likelihood that it's going to get sick. It's going to get a kidney infection and then a kidney disease, and then that's it. It's dead.
Wow, that's an interesting one. I have not heard that yet. So that's...
Oh yeah, no, do not have a bird and Teflon coated pans.
Wow, that is wild. That's wild.
Yeah.
So what's it doing to us then?
Exactly.
Right. Why do we think that that's okay? That is absolutely wild. What about I mean, we've got like chemical saturation that you kind of already outlined the massive amounts of chemicals in the home in general that most people have to deal with. How do you kind of energy fields, the environment in general, what do you do to try to optimize things and minimize the burden?
Well, first, it's a lot of what a lot of people talk about, right? Within, right? What is you? Everything that upsets you out there, it's actually you. Everything that's bothering you out there, it's you. So the first step is to make sure that your regulatory responses are working. You're sweating, you're breathing, you're pooping, you're peeing, everything is working. There's no backflow, your lymph is moving, anything that shows that there's stagnation in the body, those chemicals now become a detriment. Even good things will start to become detrimental because you're stagnating. You don't want to stagnate.
Yeah.
So first thing is to always make sure that your own regulatory processes are, in accordance with removal, taking in nutrients, expelling excess, all constantly, every day, 24/7. Beyond that is things that we can do. Like I'm not going to strip down, my walls and uproot all my floors and everything like that. But what I can do is the next step would be if I was going to repaint my walls, I'm not going to get the same type of paint. If I'm going to put new floors down, if I have the chance, I'm going to do better flooring. If I buy towels, 100% cotton towels, sheets that I sleep in, 100% cotton, the bed that I sleep in, I'm going to 8 hours, 10 hours a day of my life, half of my day, half of my existence every day is sleeping on my bed, which means that everything I'm inhaling, everything I'm touching is soaking into my system, which means that that bed, the frame, the pillows, everything should be in a way not to add and torture my body while it's trying to recuperate.
Right. Yeah, well said. And I actually like that you started that answer with, you started in the psyche. You started with the mental and emotional stuff there.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's
Just letting a truck go by. But yeah, that's so overlooked, right? Well, it doesn't feature in the conversation nearly enough. And you're like, what bothers you outside is that's you. All these things that you're responding to, that's you. Like it's your responses, it's your idiosyncratic nature. One
Mhm.
person's offended by something, but the next person's not. I like that you went there to start with. Like that's the foundation. If you're internally like dysregulated and messy, that's not a good
Absolutely.
foundation.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of I tell every patient this when they walk, any person that asks me anything, I say ideally what health is that you can be impacted by stress, toxins, whatever it may be, eating the crappiest food, and your body takes it, metabolizes it, and it's out. That would be the epitome of health. And that every single time you have these stressors in and out without any consequence, no, you're not getting rashes or pimples, your hair doesn't fall out, your body doesn't change, physiology doesn't change, you excrete it right out. And that's would be optimal. That's the zenith of health. But because we impact ourselves by taking on some stresses that are not our own, and we see them within us. That oh wait, that person made me mad. Now I'm mad. You're changing your physiology based on that thing out there. Now that's going to impact everything else. How you eat your food, how you digest your food, how you excrete. So this is needs to totally be in accordance, and there has to be an awareness that that toxin out there is going to be only destructive if you allow it to be destructive. Just like the things that you see out there, the only way they're destructive is you allow them to be destructive.
Beautiful. I love it. And so, I mean, I'm curious now as to what your, if you like, your spirituality, so to speak, or your metaphysics looks like in a nutshell. I'm just curious because that is kind of, it seems like, what you just said is what someone would say from operating out of that kind of a paradigm, like not just a reductionist, materialistic kind of a way of looking at health.
Um, yeah, in a nutshell, I mean, it's simplistic. I try to make me better. I don't like I will not go out. Like if I am invited to go out with friends to eat food, I'm not going to be, oh, I can't eat there and I can't eat there and I can't eat there. I understand that those things are not nourishing, yes, but I make sure that when I have the tools and I can and I'm going to do it, I nourish myself. I know that if someone says destructive words or does destructive things, that's not me, that's them. And even if they impose it or project it onto me, I can't take it in and nourish that negativity. Because once I do that, then it becomes mine. And I don't want it to become mine. That's that. So my understanding is that as long as I first and foremost integrate myself with understanding to be the best me outside of the context of everything around me, then whatever happens around me, whether it be another pandemic, which will never happen, which with a hurricane, an earthquake, a tornado, a war, that's out there, and as long as I keep myself regulated and aligned, I know that the resonance, it will start to kind of emanate out. And then that keeps me in a place where I can handle that. I can handle whatever comes to me from the outside, because it's not me. Me is what I can do to keep me in this place of balance.
Yeah, beautiful. And something you said a little bit earlier reminded me of our mutual mate Adam Beagleson, who kind of he's kind of in a way like it really impresses me with his approach to his own health and his eating, because I honestly, the stuff Adam eats anything and everything, and he knows, like, it's like you were saying, like, you have an awareness, oh, this is not nourishing for me, but and there's something about the way he operates in life, and he talks about joy and the importance of joy, and his dad obviously being a huge influence on him and what he learned there. Um, and I've watched Adam consume so much food that, like, myself and Amy would just be like, "No, we're not eating that." It's like, I'm sorry, but I've never seen him be anything less than completely, like, awesome and healthy and feeling great. And
Mhm.
he's one of the most laid back eaters or consumers of food that I've ever seen in my life, and also one of the most healthy, robust people I've ever seen. So
Mhm.
there's something to this, right?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, I was, I'm, I'm at that stage now, but if you were to ask me about 20 years ago, I was still in my own healing process. I was
Right.
still building up my own system of regulation, because it doesn't happen instantly.
Mm.
Right? I came from, as I said earlier, I came from a childhood where I was consuming antibiotics. I was given allergy. I was allergic to everything. So I was giving allergy medication. I was given antibiotics. I was given, things to decongest me and things like that. And it was only towards the tail end of high school, as I told you, when we were kind of going through the diet and the shelves and things like that, then I started getting, I didn't need these medications because I realized it was my diet. So there are consequences to that, like when people, give vaccinations, the neonatal vaccinations to children, there are consequences to that, because that disrupts some sort of regulation process as they grow. And so there is a healing process through that. And sometimes the healing process is an instant. And so I wanted to be in that place. I wanted, because I love food. I'm such a foodie. So for me, yeah, exactly. So for me, it's kind of like, I want to eat that dish. I know I want to eat that dish, but I know some of the ingredients that are not going to sit well. But now I'm in a place where I've encouraged more regulation in my own body. I've attuned myself so that, I have more of that joy when I'm eating something that I know is not so super awesome. Um, and it's now I can consume it, and it's like out of my system, and I don't even have to think about it. It's fine. It does what it does, and that's it. So, I mean, I want every to be like, to be like Adam, to be in that place is fantastic. And to know that, that you can do something like that and it's okay without a problem. I myself, particularly my own, is I need at least times in which, because I'm too heady. I'm a heady person. I think too much. So I know that there's times where I'm going to have to be like, no, I need a really good nourishing broth and a big old glass of raw milk. I know I need it. I need it. Like, I need to, like, feed that. And so then I could go have like a greasy old taco from a truck, then once in a while.
Yeah. No, I like that. I've noticed actually, Amy and myself, since we've been in Mexico, both of us have, I think, become more resilient. Like, we don't need to be as careful or as restricted as we once were, and kind of speaks that idea of, once you're kind of out of that healing phase, and you build your system up, or whatever it is. I mean, I think a lot of it too is once you become like afraid of consuming something in particular, the fear then becomes its own kind of driving force as well.
Correct. Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I think we load, like in psychology, you're front loading the person, you're loading them with the idea that this is bad. And so there's going to be negative triggering responses.
Mm.
Right. So that's why, I grew up with, when my parents would give me a dish, they wouldn't tell me what was in it. They'd be like, here, try this. I'd try it. Oh, this is so good. And I would eat it up. And then it'd be like 5 years later, oh, that was rabbit. And I'm like, it was good, you know? And So I think it's important that people have to kind of, just try not to, it's the nocebo effect. Like doctors do it to patients with, you have this disease and you're going to die in 6 months. You can't do that, especially with children. We have to start like the whole new paradigm of raising children. We have to stop going, no, that's bad and that's bad and don't do that. So just offer alternative. If you're like a parent, just offer an alternative. You don't want to eat a candy, just don't say that it's bad. Just say like, hey, let's do this instead. We have to create, like you said earlier, better verbs, better words, better verbiage, to instill a better kind of, narration in our own head. Because as we get older, we have the na 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 in our own head. And so if we have children, we have to make sure that na 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 is not going to be like no 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 no. So.
Yeah, like all sorts of nocebo responses, and I ate like a tiny piece of candy, and now, now I'm half dead. Ironically, our parents didn't really, like not being as health aware, generally speaking. Like obviously the paradigms have been shifting and stuff. They didn't probably do as much of that nocebo programming as we would now be likely to do with our children. So we really have to watch ourselves with that.
Right, exactly.
So, okay, so let me get back to some of these last questions that I want to kind of hit you up with, because some of these are great. Like, let me go into, this is one of my all-time favorites ever since 2020, because it forms so many, it gives me so many like opportunities for punchlines and humor. Long is one of my favorite things, one of my favorite concepts.
One of your favorite things I never heard. One of my favorite things.
Yeah, right. No, it really is, because it's so funny to me that people have taken this on and live as if it's real. When I mean, it's for you and me, and it's so obviously fraudulent. But what do people ask you about long, and what kind of conversations do you find yourself having around this?
So.
This concludes part 1 of the show. You'll find part 2 and related materials in my members-only portal, the Truthiversity, the Consciousness Raising University. This creation is the official home for all my multimedia research and entertainment content. Updated regularly, my members get access to absolutely everything I create, including full podcasts, videos, blogs, courses, audio files, live internal events, the whole enchilada. Grab yourself a free 24-hour pass at access.truthiversity.com.